What's up, folks? Wilson here. Today we are going to be attempting to clean out a fuel tank for a 97 International 4700. As you guys probably know, that is our toy hauler. It was a furniture truck. We bought it from West Virginia. We're here in Northern Virginia currently, and we're having a lot of issues with every time we go out to wheel. I have to stop every about 100 miles or so because of lack of power issue. And what's happening is we're getting rust from our tank sucked up, and that rock screen, thankfully, is catching a lot of the rust before it goes up into the injectors. The motor is a DT466E, the Legend motor. So great engine. The problem is just a fuel delivery. So I'll show you what we've been working with here.
Here is the fuel tank. It is a 60-gallon tank. I pulled off the passenger side yesterday, pulled it out of there. Fairly simple to do, just a couple straps and some lines. Inside the fuel tank, we got quite a bit of rust. There we go. You can see a little bit of it in there, and I lost the focus. But that's what's getting sucked up into our rock screen there, unfortunately. So what we have, I'll say hey to the KLR. Hi, KLR. So here is the rock screen that runs just before our fuel filter in that engine. As you can see, we're getting quite a bit of rust here, and that is blocking the flow of the fuel to the rest of the engine, so the engine bogs down. That pretty much tells me it's time to go stop and clean out the fuel screen every 100 miles or so. Here is the fuel filter. I pulled off of it and dumped what I had in the filter in this container. Not a lot, which is good. That means our fuel screen is doing its job, but still more than I really want to have to deal with. So we're gonna get in there and clean out this fuel tank. Got a couple of ideas. Not something I've ever done before. It's big equipment. I'm usually working on smaller stuff, so stick with us. I got a couple harebrained ideas, and maybe I can help somebody that's stuck in the same situation later on. Okay, so this tank from the outside again, started pulling some fittings. So what we're looking at is, I lost my place here. This fitting here is return back to the tank. So fuel return, unused fuel goes back into the tank to be recycled. This larger port here in the back is our pickup tube. So this is what we're picking up from the bottom of the tank. It is what appears to be a steel tube, so that's a good opportunity for me right now that I can go through and clean that out. And then we have our vent right back here, and this just got looks like a rollover ball. Pretty simple design. It just goes over the side of the tank. In the center, of course, looks like we have our sending unit. On top we have a ground, and then we got a resistance reading from here for our fuel gauge. This looks like just a standard float. Yep. Pretty standard design. Nothing too crazy. So looking down in the tank, if I only had a flashlight, here we go. Looking down in the tank, there we go. We can see some of the crud that we're dealing with here. It can be interesting to try and seal these 4 plus 5, so these, I guess, 9 holes up in order to wash this out. So that should be interesting. But that's what we're looking at, a little bit of anatomy. What I'm discovering gives me a chance to clean some of this other stuff out.
Okay, so we stripped the tank on the outside. You saw me pull the fittings and the rest of the plugs out. I went through the tank on the outside and looked for some bad corrosion spots where the rust is really sitting in. So what we saw for that was the tank is now on its side. I just went with the wire wheel and looking where the straps sit. We got some decent pitting here. Not too bad on the vertical sections. But where some moisture can kind of sit underneath those straps, they got got some decent pitting here. Glad to see though on the bottom of the tank, I don't see any bad pitting at all anywhere where those straps lie.
This plug on the bottom, there are 3 plugs on the tank. One on the very forward section here. This is actually directly beneath the pickup tube, which is nice to know now that if I run into issues later on, maybe I could pull that and try to get stuff that's directly below the pickup tube. And then on the very aft section of the tank, we have another plug. So cleaned out on the outside, and now I'll start working on the inside of the tank. And once it's all said and done, I'll put a nice coat of Rust-Oleum Hammer Black or something on the outside to try to inhibit that corrosion from coming.
So what we've done now is we've plugged up the rest of the holes, used a 1.5-inch pipe plug, some scrap screws and random fittings I had around here to plug up what was left in the tank, and I used the factory fill neck. I'm going to get a removable freeze plug because I don't want to ruin that cap for the chemicals that I might be using to work inside this tank. I do have a ratchet strap around there with a rock climbing quick draw. I'll show you what I'm gonna use that for later. But right now what I've done is I've taken some hot water, some Dawn dish soap, because it's like 14 degrees out in here right now. And I'm gonna slash the tank around, try to get some of the excess rust flakes out of there, flip it upside down and drain it. So that's what we're dealing with now.
Really glad I'm doing this because one of these rust spots, this would be on the aft edge of the tank, I found a little pinhole after rolling it around for a little bit. So it's good to know. I'll circle that and weld that up at some point. All right. So that is a little bit of diesel residue, probably quite a bit of rust, some water, and some Dawn dish soap. You can see definitely getting some rust chunks out of it. Apparently at some point I bashed my thumb a little bit, but I hear diesel fuel's pretty good for cleaning wounds, so we'll just get some of that in there.
All right, here we are again. We're about ready to start cleaning this tank out. So what I've done is I brought our rock crawler in, and I have strapped the tank to the back tire, and I'm going to be running some of this evaporust, and I'm going to be putting in probably about 3 feet of chain with that evaporust. I'm going to run about half a gallon in the tank and put the truck in 4 low. Just the rear wheel's going to be spinning, and we'll rotate that tank around and try to knock some of that rust off. We will see how this goes. Get in there. There it is. First case in, second case in. 4 low, 4 low. It's about a 220 to 1 with first gear in. Make the rock crawler do the hard work for us. Yeah, we rotated it quarter turn. Make sure we got the roof and floor of the inside of the tank. So we've been rolling this thing around for about an hour. I've turned it forward, front, reverse, rotated the tank a couple different ways. Now I'm going to drain this sucker out. See if we can get the thing out of there. Definitely warm. Cleaned up the chain quite a bit. There's something. So we have ran 1 pint of acetone through the tank, sloshed it around a little bit, drained it out, ran a 2nd pint of acetone through the tank, rolled it around, drained it out, and I air dried the tank once already, removed the drain plugs, and I got a shop vac hooked up to the main fill port.
And all that's doing is just creating some negative pressure. I'm getting as much of that acetone dry as possible.
So the tank's been cleaned out as much as I want to, and all the little specks of rust and stuff that I found in it, they're all vacuumed out. So the tank, I'm trying to bring the tank back up to temperature now, so the sealant can take. What I'm going to use for sealant is this redkote, the fuel tank liner. Not very cheap stuff, probably about 30 bucks a quart, and I got 3 quarts hoping it'll work for a 60-gallon tank. So my plan is to pour this stuff in the tank, roll it around until I get a nice even coat, drain out the excess, and then I'll have to take it inside the house to let it dry. The wife is being an absolute trooper. She's already in there setting up sawhorses in the spare room, and we'll let that air dry in the spare room at room temperature. So, see what this stuff is all about. It's got a pretty thick consistency, kind of like motor honey. If I can get in there. Quart is not very much. Hopefully that'll be enough.
Okay, 3 coats of redkote, or 3 quarts rather of redkote in the tank. Rolled it around on all 6 sides, and kind of the rolled sides. You can see the corners are very rounded. So spent about 1.5 minutes on each side. I did try to get the most I could out of the other quarts, and diluted it just a little bit with acetone just to get the residue that was in the tanks, the little quart cans, and in draining it, a lot spilled. It's bright red, so looks like my garage floor is covered in blood, which is pretty metal. I think I would have been left over with about a little over a quart, so that's good to know for next time when doing a tank. So the driver's side tank is pretty much done and drying. I did put it inside after getting a lot of the fumes on it, put it in the spare room, put some heat on it, so that redkote should be drying pretty thoroughly. I did sweep the driver's side tank. What did I say? Did the passenger already. Now doing the driver's side tank. I did yank that today, and I'm trying a little bit of a different technique with cleaning it out this time, making sure I get everything. I did drain it with all the diesel, drain all the diesel out of it, and then hot soapy water twice, rolled it around the driveway for a little while, drained all that out, and then I used ATF Dextron 3 because the detergent's in it, and cut that with some mineral spirits, probably about 1 gallon total between ATF mineral spirits. Rolled that around for a while, and now I'm currently draining, using a different draining technique too. I learned a lot on the first tank, so in the morning after this is all drained, I will go back through and start with the evaporust with the chain, evaporust without the chain, acetone, redkote, as long as the weather keeps up with me. We don't go too far below freezing. I'll keep some heat on it and try not to blow myself up. Well, I think we may have gotten it. Both tanks are now in. The redcoat's all dry. I made 2 trips to the gas station to get 15 gallons each of diesel in these tanks. I had to prime the filters, but it's running fine. Ran a little rough at startup, of course, but that's because I had a little air in the lines. I think we're all good now. Everything, both tanks are in. I don't have any leaks, so I'm going to take this sucker to out to the nearest gas station and then fill up both tanks with diesel. It looks like we may have gotten it, and I guess only time will tell whether or not we got all the rust and algae out of there.